Hello and welcome to what I believe is episode 80 of the 905 podcast. Difficult to believe that we've got there so quickly. And today we're going to be doing our usual Thursday roundup of stories in the 905. And we've got three pretty big stories actually from three different areas of the 905. And we're going to start off, Joel, with a story that you mentioned, which is, guess what? Halton, I keep on doing that. Halton Catholic District School Board has waded into the issue of human rights again. You have the update.
So this is kind of fitting off of our last episode with Sergeant Carr talking about, racism and social equity in Canada. We're still talking about the Halton Catholic School Board, and in case somebody is not a longtime listener of this podcast, we have talked with the HCDSB and to the HCDSB many times in the past, notably about them voting not to raise the pride flag for the month of June. For Pride Month. However, this past week on June 15th, at a board meeting, a number of students went before the board to advocate for themselves and for their fellow students to talk about racism and discrimination that they've experienced within the board. And when it came time to vote on this motion, it's reported that a number of the trustees decided to do nothing to stall the meeting and just have no staff report, nobody investigate, no anything, just move on and pretend that it doesn't exist. I mean, this caught me by surprise. I'm not entirely. I should say it doesn't catch me by surprise, but it's disappointing to say the least. That this, especially in a month of June, in light of Pride Month, as well as we hear the stories of the 215 children's unmarked graves being discovered in Kamloops, the act of Islamophobia in London, that we're not maybe taking a little bit more of an inward look at ourselves to address these inequities, and maybe just, are we doing everything we can to make this right? I'd also want to note that it's not just the Halton Catholic School Board that is under examination for this. We also have the Hamilton Public School Board was recently in the news for our third-party investigation. If people remember, in Hamilton, a former student trustee, Ahona Mehdi, brought to everyone's attention accusations of racism at the board level and within the school system. The HWDSB launched a third-party investigation and discovered that those accusations were accurate. That there is a culture of racism within the board. Again, nothing is done to address this. There's no talk of education. There's no talk of accountability, of disciplinary actions towards the trustees who were in opposition to Ahona Mehdi. And I mean, we could go off on into the minutiae of those reports. I don't want to. I kind of want to talk about the notion that there was something that Sergeant Carr brought up in the last episode of needing an education system that properly addresses this, that properly examines this and educates our students and empowers them to say, no, this is wrong, this is not right, and we need to change. And yet we're stuck with backwards thinking at the institutional level, blocking this.
Yeah, there's seems to me, and I didn't listen to the proceedings of the Halton meeting the other day, so I can't talk about the specifics of what was going on, but what seems to have gone on is a kind of a continuation of what's happening before, is that when students come forward and say, this is a problem, the trustees basically say, no, there isn't. And not all of them, but enough that there can be no progress on these subjects. And it's the usual four suspects, I believe, who are basically behind this. In Hamilton, I mean, the one trustee in particular, Carol Paikin Miller, was asked to resign by her own colleagues back in March, following the report, which singled out multiple trustees, but certainly singled her out even more so than the other ones. She didn't bother to turn up at the meeting where it was discussed. She has made several remarks since that make it quite clear that she does not view the report as valid in any way, and she hasn't resigned, won't resign, not interested in resigning, as far as it's clear. And the sad part of this is that the original student trustee who's behind this, Hona Mehdi, has her mother said in an article at the weekend, been dealing with serious kind of personal repercussions from having stepped forward, and that's just a real tragedy. But it's something that you worry about, these stories that students are involved in, students who are not necessarily at a point in their lives where they're going to deal with the stress of suddenly being in the public eye lightly, and it's worth remembering that students don't do these kind of things lightly. Because it's scary.
It is, but you have to give credit to them that, and it's something that you and I have noticed as we've been doing 80 episodes of this. The young people that are out there are, to borrow a phrase, mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. There's a big, you want to call it social justice warriors or snowflakes or whatever have you. It doesn't matter. There are young people out there who are saying, it's not right. I'm not going to lay down and take it because the old people in charge say that I have to. It's very empowering. I'm impressed by them that they're not taking it laying down. It's frustrating to see these old dinosaur points of view still being taken as gospel, and just especially at the education level, to sit there and say, maybe I have something to learn. Maybe there is something here, and it's to say to just dismiss everything. Oh, it's going to take too much time to change, or we have a right to this, or first of all, you're a school board trustee. You have no power. You have the power over a small chunk of people, and the only thing I could think of that why you would want to hold on to it is you want to make young people think the way that you do, and that's more insidious and horrific than a politician with power. But it's
I suspect there's a whole lot of people with closed minds, whose minds closed long ago, whose egos are somewhat stroked by positions of elected office, however small and however powerless they may be, who are buying a whole load of nonsense that you might be reading in for instance, the National Post about cancel culture and all this.
Right.
This dishwater that's floating around. And are buying that, and I'm like, I'm not going to have it. And meanwhile, there's these children who are dealing with racism at school from fellow students, from teachers. And I'm not making any specific allegations because I don't know. I'm not the person, but trust them because they don't really have a huge motivation to make stuff up. Like you said, we've mentioned offline, if not while recording, multiple times how some of the most powerful, articulate statements that we've had on this podcast as we began came from young people who are still students or recently left school, who are just trying to do something good because they care. And it blows my mind that you have a right to disagree. Obviously, every trustees are elected. They're elected to have their opinions, but they're also elected to listen And your first inclination should always be to believe until you have a good reason not to believe. It seems that anything a student says is basically not worth listening to for too many of these trustees. And that's a real problem. And for me, it calls the entire trustee system into question. It's not, elected school trustees is not something that the whole world does. It's not an integral part of our democracy. And I don't see really what these people are bringing to the table right now.
As a parent of a child in the system, I sit there and I look and wonder, I do ask myself, what is the purpose of a school board? And really, it's more just to make sure that the money is spent properly. Like the job itself is basically a glorified accountant, where you sit and you make sure, okay, the province hands us a wad of money, and we have to make sure, okay, we're putting it into buying new textbooks or buying new science lab equipment or new football equipment if need be, or upgrades, renovations and retrofits or whatever to existing infrastructure. Or perhaps you need to go and look, where do we build a new school because of increased population, all that stuff. It's not a glamorous and it's not a sexy job. Yet we see time and time again trustees stepping outside that purview and deciding, no, I need to, the opinions that nobody else cares about when I talk about, everybody else ignores me when I want to say these inflammatory things. Nobody cares about them when I say them, but you know what? Now I can actually, I can cause. I do find it's inconsequential, but it's just, why? Like, why are you going to stir this shit up? We go back. I'm thinking back to the pride flag issue. Like, do you think you're going to cause, all of a sudden everybody's reevaluate? Oh, geez, maybe pride isn't worth it. Oh my gosh, I've seen the light. No, you've just kicked up a hornet's nest. If you're going to sit there and say, when a student says, what I think you said to me or what you've done to me is racist, are you going to sit there and say, no, it's not? Well, you don't have the right to say that. If they naturally, my inclination would be, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. My apologies. Please accept my apology. I ask for your forgiveness. I was ignorant. You've enlightened me. You move on. And instead it says, or I need to make a point out of this. And I'm like, what is your point? The only point that you're making is that you're showing yourselves to be racist and homophobic and bigoted, and it's ugly. And I'm like, why do I have to put up with this when all I need you to do is just say, yep, we're going to open up a school over here and I'm going to hire some more textbooks for the science department.
Yeah, I think the mistake is, if you compare a board of trustees to a board of directors at a company or a non-profit, so every non-profit organization will have a board of trustees, and they meet every so often, and they sign off on the accounts, and they have some ultimate authority in that they are there to make sure that the ship is being run properly, and that no one's cooking the books and so on. That's basically what a board of trustees does too. What a board of directors doesn't do is suddenly get involved in employee dress codes or stuff like that, or moral questions, or
right.
It's not like they're up in business. That's what the executive director will do if they have to do it at all. But it's just not. It's like, what are you doing talking about these things that are none of your business? Now, if they're being racist, then yeah, sure, it is now their business because they brought it upon themselves. But, in terms of kind of denying that there's racism within schools, I don't see that that's a trustee responsibility. I don't see that they have any qualification to make a judgment one way or the other. If the students say there is, then it should be investigated, and it should be investigated by the director of education and by the professional staff, not by the damn trustees.
Moving on.
Yep. Moving on indeed. And number 2 on our list is, there's been a vote today within the last few hours in Hamilton on at Hamilton Council, although not by the council per se, but by a committee of council on the LRT. It was a 9-6 vote in favour of moving to draw up a memorandum of understanding with Metrolinx over LRT. So that basically, to translate that into English, is a vote to move forward to the next step. So not a vote against LRT. That's a committee vote. It now has to be approved by the full council. Given that it was 9-6, 9 plus 6 equals 15, that indicates to me that that committee has all councillors on it. And I'm not enough of an expert of how Hamilton does things to know whether their committees are, a committee of the whole, if you like. But that's a positive thing. Is disappointing still that 6 would still wish to turn down a gift horse of $3+ billion. But still, it's hopeful that they will not shoot themselves spectacularly in the foot and just ruin this thing. Well,
you know what? We're not. I'm not popping the champagne just yet on this one, because it's Hamilton. It's Hamilton City Council. There is still plenty of time to fumble this ball on the 5-yard line. There are people who just point out that this is like never in the history of this country has a gift of this magnitude been given to a municipality. This, like, I really don't think that those 6 councillors understand just how much of a gift this funding is. I'm glad the 9 councillors who voted in favor are pushing forward with it. I think it. We've discussed it many times. We think the LRT is a good project to have in Hamilton for a variety of reasons, which we will not get into. If you want to listen to that, listen to the back catalog. Boost up our numbers that way. But the dispirited. What got me with the whole argument was just the dispiriting nature of this debate in itself. Right? Was that we're still hearing these old arguments being made. We're still hearing these convoluted, we don't know the full cost of the operating costs. Well, you're spitballing. You don't know anything. You're just looking for anything.
Well, I mean, through their own intransigence, they've actually managed to force a spectacular deal out of the federal or provincial governments.
Right.
And that the federal government is so desperate for Hamilton to catch a break, they're willing to basically say, here, the only, I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this during an interview earlier or before, but if you think of it like being given a luxury car, here's a luxury car. All you've got to pay for is the petrol, is the gasoline, I should say, because I actually live in Canada for the last 20 years. All you got to pay is put the fuel in the thing and run it. And you're like, oh, I don't want to pay for the gas. Take your Rolls Royce back, or take your Tesla back, or take your Mercedes back. It's crazy, but that's the level of the argument we've been having.
Well, we've seen like every argument. We don't know the cost, and we don't know. Why should the peripheral? Why should Stoney Creek and Ancaster pay for these? Like, then why would why pay for anything? Like, why pay for why pay property tax at all? Why pay money to go have for your streets get plowed in a snowstorm, where your streets might get plowed, but you know what? They might start downtown first. You might not get your streets plowed until long after you need it. So
that argument just goes nowhere, because you say, why are all the people in downtown Hamilton paying to support the extremely long sewers that have to be built into suburbs? That they're not using those sewers, so why do they have to subsidize Stoney Creek's sewer system? Well, because that's the way government works. Right. Everybody pays into the pot. Everybody gets to take out of the pot.
It's this backward notion of this transactional form of government. Like you only get, we should only get what we pay into, which is malarkey. You're right. That's not how government works. We all pay taxes. We all pay into the pot, and then we all get a say in how it's used. But your argument can't be based on, well, I don't live near this area, so I don't want any of my money going to helping this neighborhood. It's extremely short-sighted. I think it's honestly just a very disingenuous argument to make on the part of the city councilors, because quite frankly, you may, if that's your going to be argument, I don't want to pay for it because, it's not near my people. Then guess what? The neighborhoods that you are in, I'm thinking of Judy Partridge up in Waterdown. You don't have a lot there. It costs a lot to send maintenance trucks out, to send parks and rec trucks out. It costs a lot for city utilities to go out to your part of the city. If you're going to make that argument, well, there are more people in the downtown core. Maybe they'll next time say, no, I don't want my money to go to help you out.
And it's a terrible, terrible way to look at things. I mean, there are rumors that Judy Partridge is considering running for the PCs. Good luck with that. She was a really successful Liberal candidate, I got to tell you. Not. I mean, it was a tough election for anybody, but I think she would have been struggling even in a better election. It's so. I mean, it's just so infuriating. People look at, you've basically got children looking at things and looking at just the top level, and refusing to look at things in any kind of depth. Now, I mean, there are arguments about LRT that are more justifiable, but not if. Basically, the argument is they just don't want transit. They don't want to spend anything on transit. And there's all this stuff like, well, maybe we'll have bus rapid transit. No, they'll vote against that too, because it still doesn't help them. It's in the case of, let's dive into the whole Bob Bratina mess.
Oh God!
In the case of Bob Bratina, this is just a man who's just seen an opportunity, who's bored of sitting on the back benches because he's never going to get anywhere at Ottawa, going, hey, maybe I'll have another kick at the can in Hamilton and try and,
what
have
gets
a third referendum on LRT.
Well, at the rate that they're going, if the city council does vote to approve this memorandum of understanding, it's shovels are going to be in the ground. Once that happens, it's going to be real hard to cancel this thing. What I find really just disingenuous or just really shameful is Bob Bratina announced that he was not going to be running in the next election, whenever that happens, as the Liberal MP for Hamilton East Stoney Creek. Fair enough, that's his decision. Yeah, instead of doing what most people do is just say, okay, just gracefully walking, taking your walk in the snow, walking away, he's decided he's going to spend his last few days trying to sabotage this thing, essentially, by going to the parliamentary budget office in Ottawa and asking them to examine the numbers on the funding promise and trying to nitpick and torpedo this thing at the federal level to try and cancel. I mean, $3.4 billion for your city, because why? You need to prove a point that LRT sucks and your idea was always the best one to begin with. That is just really mean.
And his argument, is that the federal government can't tell municipalities how money is meant to be spent. And it's like, well,
yeah, they can.
They tell municipalities how to spend money every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Municipalities are not. They'd have no rights in the BNA Act or the Constitution Act. They're complete entities of the province. Not to mention the city itself was asking, "Can you give us the money?" The city itself was saying, "We want you to pay for a lot of this," and basically the federal government said, "We'll not pay for some of it. Basically we're going to pay for all of it. We'll do you one better." But the federal government, of course, can put conditions on the money. That's what they do with the GST transfer or the fuel tax transfer, right? They say no.
Yeah, you're right. I was just going to mention that.
You can have this
for roads and stuff.
It's for infrastructure. You can't use it to pay your salaries or hire consultants or whatnot. You've got to use it to build roads and sewers and all that nitty gritty stuff that cities need to do. They can do it all the time. They do it all the time with the provinces. They all the healthcare transfers. That's not just a big check that they hand over to Ontario and Quebec and Alberta and whatnot. Their money that's a lot of times no, we want to see an accountant. We want to see receipts.
Yeah, it's earmarked for specific things. And, Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of this, I suspect, is about trying to delay and play out the clock on the basis that this is a minority government that could fall at any moment. And for whatever reason, 2 years is about the mark that people expect minority governments to last. I'm not sure that the NDP have the money or are in any position to want an election right now.
I don't think any federal party wants an election right now. Ironically, if there's a party that would want one, it's going to be the Liberals.
That's true, yeah.
Because they are riding high in the polls still, apparently, and nobody's warmed up to Aaron O'Toole or to Jagmeet Singh, apparently, since the pandemic started. So you're right. I think Joey Coleman actually had a good article or Twitter thread, I can't remember which, but basically outlining that they're running down the clock. That if the city council doesn't push this through, get this approved, get it going, get shovels in the ground to start the project. If a federal election is called, that money disappears. It's off the table, because there might not be, or at the very least, if the Liberals are reelected, which there's a possibility, you have to start again. They have to get a new budget cycle, a new pool of money, and then start, earmarking it for this. It's going to be, you're putting it off even further. Like, it's here now. Get it done. Why it's taken this long is beyond me. I really don't understand how it's taken this long just to get this memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, government takes an awful lot of patience, and yes, certainly not a skill I particularly have. Anyway, it's a positive move, so hopefully there's that. In terms of Mr. Brattina, I should just point out again, I did a few calculations and worked out that if he remains in Parliament till October, he will collect his full MP's pension, and I'm sure I'm sure that's a pure coincidence. I would never accuse someone of staying in Parliament purely to collect their pension. But I don't understand why. Well, I guess I do understand why the Prime Minister would not boot Mr. Brattina from the party whip, and that can turn a molehill into much more of a mountain sometimes, as it has in recent history. However, on the other hand, I don't see the point of having this guy literally firing torpedoes into your own party policy from your party's backbenches. It's bizarre, but there we go. It's not my decision. So.
No.
Anyway, let's move on to item number 3 on our list, and it is kind of a big deal in Burlington, I guess, or will certainly be portrayed as a big deal, and we can discuss whether it is a big deal or not. And that is that there was an announcement yesterday by the government, the provincial government, hand in hand with the Burlington Council and the mayor, that Burlington's been permitted to move the boundaries of its urban growth centre to away from where it's centred now, which is on downtown Burlington and the lakeshore, and kind of move it northwards, so that it now centres on the Burlington GO station. So the point of this, or the objective and the idea behind it, is that urban growth centres, that designation, every town has an urban growth centre. Oakville, which is the next city along the lake, their urban growth centre is placed exactly like that around their GO station. And they did that because they realised that Oakville downtown has no major roads into it. And it's actually a surprisingly inconvenient spot to get to if you're talking about major transit centres and things like that. So urban growth centres need to have transit. Burlington's was downtown, and that was based on the John Street bus station, which has subsequently been adjudged not to be a major transit hub. And it really is, they call it a bus station. It's really a bus shelter with a few more buses than the rest of the town gets. So this gives the city additional power, so the argument goes, and we can have a discussion about it in a second, that this gives the city more power over the most sensitive part of downtown Burlington to control what developers can get in terms of height and massing and things like that, and that we can focus on a more appropriate location for like really, really, really high density around the GO station. That's the argument. I'm just putting the argument out there, and you fire away with your thoughts, Joel.
I don't think it'll make much of a difference at all. I don't, and here's the reason why. For those who are listening who are not from Burlington and have no idea what I'm talking about, the Burlington GO station, I live near, close by. It's a mix of some residential neighborhoods. Think of single dwelling homes, single family homes, a few low rise apartment buildings, very, very few, and the rest is industrial. The rest is like mom and pop shops, tool and die shops, that kind of thing. The major real estate has already been bought up by developers and is slated to be developed into high-rise condominium complexes, like multi-tower units, all meant to be just you buy a unit, you're a commuter, you can literally walk onto the GO station tracks and you're on your way to Toronto. I mean, it can be designated an urban growth center. If I'm thinking from a developer standpoint, there's not really a lot to buy there. You can go out and buy some of the tool and die shops, those land if you want to go to talk to the owners there. You might find a couple that are willing to sell. You can go in and look at trying to buy up the residential units to build something, but at the current market prices, good luck. If you want to buy my house, I'm going to be asking for like $1.5 million, and my house isn't that big. It's just the market's not there to develop anything. Where the market is and always has been is downtown. Now I can understand that it kind of puts a quiver in the city's or an arrow in the city's quiver to say no, you can't build a high rise. A developer will find a way. I don't think a developer is going to sit there and just say, "Oh, okay, well, we'll go where you want." The developer wants to build downtown. Why? Because they sell. It's been proven time and time again. Everybody wants to live downtown. They are willing to pay, big bucks to buy a normal sized condo in the downtown core. Developers they're not going to turn away. They're just not going to turn away from that.
I certainly don't think developers will stop trying to build downtown. I have a more positive view of this, and maybe this is what's the word? Sort of not Munch. I'm trying to think of the right phrase. It's not Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but maybe I've just spent too long sticking my nose into city stuff. I think, from the start point, I think it's a more realistic reflection of the reality of how Burlington is built. So you can say, well, designation is, while we have LPAT, everything in urban planning in Ontario is too moot for my liking. However, basically the developers used to come along for any development downtown and say, well, okay, you've zoned it for 12 stories. But you're in an urban growth center, you're in a major transit, MTSA, major transit station area. Then they would go to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe and talk about density targets. And so they would mention all these things. And each argument is kind of like another thing that takes the decision really away from the city. Because John Street is no longer going to be an MTSA, and because downtown is the main part of downtown, not all of it, it is no longer going to be considered part of the urban growth center. You've taken two of those arguments away. That when things inevitably go to LPAT, as they always do, the LPAT should, in theory, say, okay, well, these are the arguments. Mm-hmm. Now, it could still be a huge fat disaster in that the new urban growth center is, right through the middle of it goes a big, ugly road, Fairview Street, big, ugly junctions. There's the transit. transit does center much more on there, because not only, Burlington's real bus station is actually the GO station. It could be more of a proper hub for interlinking transit, and perhaps it'll become that. But I think the city hopefully should now look at really making that whole neighborhood far more pedestrian-centric. The development that's happened so far, there's a very large development that was built right by the station, Paradigm, I think it's called.
Yep.
That it's meant to be mixed use, but there's no mixed use there. It's just 100% residential. That's not what we're supposed to be building. I know what used to be a garden centre further down has been sold, and I think there's like 3 towers coming there or something like that. Again, I'm not sure that what is zoned for mixed use is actually going to be mixed use. And that's
I don't think you need mixed use on those locations. Honestly, they're meant for younger urban professionals, yuppies, to buy a condo. You wake up, you throw on your suit, you go down the elevator, you literally walk onto the train track or the train platform, tap your Presto card, and you're off to work. Whether or not that will actually happen remains to be seen. And I'm thinking like post-COVID. There's a whole thing that's way beyond the purview of this segment to talk about.
I think it'd be really interesting now to take a look at how Oakville has approached this over a much longer period, and that they basically have been trying to build a new Oakville Centre, not to replace the old one necessarily, but to live alongside it and to provide different things. Now, the extent to which that is actually coming into being or has come into being, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it. But that's the plan. It's if you're building dormitories for people who actually spend most of their time in Toronto, that's a crying shame. I don't think, he's hoping that we're getting into kind of a post-commuter world where far fewer people have to jump on the train all the time.
I hope to see that. I do want to talk a bit about the politics behind it, though, because I thought that's interesting. Because the announcement was made by Minister Steve Clark, who's the Minister of Municipal Affairs. Jane McKenna was there, and as well as the Mayor, Meed Ward. Now, there was something that Marianne made in her said in her statement that Burlington will now have a say. They will be able to have a say in how Burlington is shaped, and it's no longer going to be the developers. Essentially, was her. I'm paraphrasing a bit. I thought she's setting herself up for a major failure with that remark, only because the act itself indicates how little power the city actually has. They had to go to the province, spend years lobbying to have Jane McKenna lobby to the minister to change this designation so that they don't have to have developers using this plan to be, at LPAT. My argument has always been they're going to use a different argument. The developers just use that argument because it was there. It was easy to use. Developers are smart. They have lawyers. They'll find another argument to use. So to make this sound like, Burlington now has the final say. We'll get to shape how we want it. No, you won't, because there's still going to be high rises going up. There still will be plans approved. There are still, the moratorium on development downtown still stands. You and I were talking about this. There are lawsuits by developers against the city for this plan, this moratorium on development, that are now going to LPAT. This Burlington City Council thinks that they're ahead of the ball on this. They've outsmarted the developers. I don't think they've outsmarted anyone. I think if anything, they've made it. They're setting the precedent that developers know that we don't need to do this. They've stripped the power themselves of trying to reform the system to give themselves more power. They thought that they were giving themselves more power. I think if anything, they just proven that they don't have any power. It's entirely at the provincial level. It's entirely the purview of the minister. It's entirely in the purview of LPAT. City council can bitch and moan about it all they want, but in the end, the developer is just going to sit there, go to LPAT, and make the case. They were still going to get high rises downtown. They are not going to be the 12-story zoned projects. They just won't be. the developers will find a way. They'll either nickel and dime councillors. They will bombard them with they will bombard them with amendments. Because this is what I would do. I just like throw amendments. Just everything that we want. Like we want 40 stories. We want helicopter pads on the roof. Like I want to connect I want to have a walkway connecting all these condo towers around downtown. So if you live 15 stories or above, you don't have to touch the floor, touch the street. Like I'm just throwing all this stuff, and just so that city council. Because here's the thing. As we said, city council can't talk to each other, right? They can't coordinate with themselves to say, hey, how do we defeat this? They can only talk in that meeting. And if I was a developer, this is what I do. I just I don't care. Like, do I care what it looks like? No. I build it. I sell my units. I walk away with a nice profit. My shareholders are happy. I'm happy. I don't care. And that's what I suspect is going to happen. The developer's it's going to become nastier and more combative. And the city council doesn't have, they can't coordinate amongst themselves. What's our united front? And the developers just have to pick it at that one at a time, which they don't have any power. The real power will always be at LPAT.
It'd be very strange of me to be the person on this recording who's less negative about LPAT than someone else, because I thought I took the cake on that one. I think, well, I don't think it's a magic bullet, that's for sure. And I had some problems with the interim control bylaw, because the effect has been to actually, in the short term or even medium term, give up the city's ability to actually sit around a council table and hash out, do we like this, do we not like this?
Right.
Because they're saying nothing's happening. And the developer says, okay, I'm appealing, we'll go to LPAT, we'll sort it out that way. And that's what happened. I mean, it's the first one of those has kind of come through the pipeline, which is the Amica development. So I had my reservations about that. And I having run in that election, I know I would have voted to support it, because I would have been in the job for a week. And then I would have now been questioning myself. However, I think the city has done the only thing that was available to it to do, and what it was voted in to do. Whether it works is almost a secondary issue. The LPAT, I mean, I do feel that this council's been in for 3 years. There was a declaration made at the region that the LPAT should be abolished a while back, but that was like one and done. That was the only comment that was made on that. I would like to see all the municipalities putting serious pressure on the government, serious pressure on potential future governments, perhaps more to the point, for LPAT reform, and to really put that front and center. Because you are right, until the LPAT issue is fixed, it's never going to be perfect. And yeah, I mean, if you take Mayor Meed Ward's comment there that now we have control, it's like, no, you don't have any more control today than you did yesterday. You've just moved where you don't have control of north a bit.
Right.
So for downtown, which is obviously a very sensitive, a hugely sensitive subject for a lot of people, you've said, okay, we'll trade you this bit of Burlington for this bit of Burlington. And I would say that that's okay, but it doesn't give you any more control. It's just swapped where you arguably have a little bit of additional control. But yeah, I mean, and none of this, I mean, we were discussing this offline the other day, and none of this gets to the issue that when we talk about urban planning, municipal governments in Canada, and probably anywhere in North America, don't really plan per se. They kind of pencil in the outlines of what might be possible. That's what an official plan is. It's like, okay, this is what we're thinking. Something roughly this size could go in this box, something roughly. There's no vision there. There's no, there is no real, and they don't have the power to really do anything in a really visionary way. I mean, they can lay out streets and they can put in street furniture and choose the signs and things like that to fit what they hope will come. But if a developer comes forward and says, I want to build, I don't know, something completely contrary to the kind of vision that the city has, they have no control over that, and that's what will be built if the LPAT says so. And the LPAT has no interest in in the look of things. There's no interest in architectural merit or the individuality of the town or anything like that. They're like, how many people live in it? Does it fit within what the growth plan says? Yes, okay, tick, go away and build. And that ultimately, for me, is the bigger problem in this whole picture, that we can't plan in the sense that most human beings think of planning, of saying, this is what our city will look like when we're done. And it'll be great because this thing is something that really suits Burlington, whereas Oakville might do something different, and Mississauga might do something different. You can't do that. Every city is the same because the developers say, okay, this is what's going to make me the most profit. Can I build it? Yes, I can. End of story. And that's kind of the much bigger picture of the whole thing ultimately. But that said, if I was sitting on council right now, I would be printing up my leaflets right now and saying this is a huge victory, and I get that.
I know they're going to say that's what everybody's saying that. I find it interesting that Lisa Kearns is now saying how great Steve Clark is as minister, when just a few weeks ago she was campaigning to run for the Liberal nomination in Burlington. And that's what I get is this. And from a political standpoint, I find it's interesting because they've really cut off their legs here. They're tying themselves directly to a very unpopular government provincially, where chances are they will either be defeated or reelected under really sketchy circumstances that people are going to be very upset with, which in my mind is going to limit the city count, this mayor and some councillors who want to side with the government, limit their ability to do things. The only person who I think walks away with any shred of victory on this is honestly Jane McKenna, because she looks like somebody who got this done. She might win her seat back. My thinking is she'll probably will win Burlington again, but she'll be once again a backbencher in the opposition come next election. That's just my early prediction.
It's a discussion for another day. Yeah. And you know what? I mean, the sad thing for me always is, and I can never resist mentioning it, it will be decided by the NDP and the Liberals, and whether people can jump into one bracket or the other one. And I'm not telling people which bracket is the best bracket, but if progressives go to one way or the other way, then Jane McKenna will lose. And if they split the vote, Jane McKenna will win. That's kind of how it works, but that's another issue. But yeah, I mean, it's strange that Jane McKenna attended the groundbreaking of the Carriage Gate building downtown on Brand Street, right opposite City Hall, which is the most controversial building ever built in the history of Burlington, and widely loathed by approximately 90% of people who live anywhere close to it. She attended the groundbreaking knowing that there was a municipal election basically ultimately about that development, because that was what kicked everything off. She kind of said, screw you, I'm going to side with the developers. And now we have her being the white knight to save everything. Well, we'll leave it to others to decide whether that's merited or not. And to what degree, when the mayor was negotiating with the province, she was negotiating with the MPP or directly with the ministry.
All right. Well, on that note, let's bring this episode to a close, because I think people are done listening to us for this week. I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for listening to our 80th episode. Wow, 80. That's a big number.
I know. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to us all this time so far. We will see you on the next 80 for sure. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.